when your outgo exceeds your income, your upkeep becomes your downfall. And that's what America must deal with. Even students from a school system as dysfunctional as the one in the United States would understand, I think, that it's impossible to come up with a positive sum if you add a column of negative numbers. And that's the circumstance that we're in. You don't have to have attended a school system as good as the one in Singapore to be able to understand that you can't add a string of minuses and come up with a positive. It simply doesn't work like that.
Before we dive in, a quick whisper about today's sponsor, Ghost Founder. You know that moment when an idea jumps from someday to why not today? Ghost Founder lives in that moment. Ghost Founder takes the sketch from your napkin, gives it a heartbeat, and walks it out into the world. Fast. While everyone else is still writing pitch decks, the ghosts are wiring prototypes, lining up seed investors, and tuning your ops. Product market fit isn't just a hope, it's an outcome. If you're the kind of renegade who refuses to wait for permission, visit ghostfounder.com. Because around here, we scope things, build things, and fund things, in that order. Ghost Founder, the quiet engine behind loud breakthroughs.
We are back with one of our favorite guests, a man that needs very little introduction, Mr. Rick Rule. Last time we talked to Rick, that was the same day that Bitcoin had just hit $100,000 a piece. Today, almost exactly today, it's gold hitting $4,000 an ounce. Since then, we met Rick in person in Vancouver at our good friend Jayant Bhandari's conference. And there we heard him break down America's balance sheet in a talk that he titled Arithmetic of America. We enjoyed that so much that we invited him to come back today, dive a little deeper into topics like wealth, freedom, and, little projects like starting a bank might be the ultra contrarian move for somebody like Rick. So he can tell us all about that. Welcome back, Rick. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Pleasure to be back. It's nice to visit with you again. It was nice to catch sight of you physically in Vancouver at Jayant's wonderful conference.
Yeah. Hey, Rick, so we're really excited. So what if we just start the conversation off with that speech you gave, Arithmetic of America? Because I found it super riveting, and I thought it could set the stage for this episode.
Well, I guess because I gave it, I felt it was an interesting speech. Normally, in a sociological forum like that, when you introduce the topic of arithmetic, you put the audience to sleep. And I will say it was heartening to find you guys both awake during that talk. Some of the older members of the crowd found it somewhat less riveting. But it is, I think, for people your age, it's almost an existential speech because it speaks to the provision of goods and services in the future. And it speaks to the faith that society still has in non-consensual collective action. And I think those are going to be challenging convictions going forward. So happy to talk about it.
Yeah, excellent. I mean, I don't want you to rehash the whole thing, but could you maybe
A synopsis?
Yeah, just a quick synopsis for our audience would be fantastic.
Your listeners should get out a pen or pencil and some paper because the numbers are staggering, but they're easy to forget. The headline number is this: the Internal Revenue Service, or as I call them, the Infernal Revenue Service, the people in charge of collecting tax in the United States, suggest that the private net worth of all Americans is $146 trillion. So that's your headline number. The Congressional Budget Office suggests that the value of on-balance sheet liabilities, which is to say the American government's debt to bondholders, including itself, is about $37 trillion, or $30 trillion net of the Fed's own holding of their own paper. The Congressional Budget Office also suggests that the net present value, not nominal value, but the net present value of unfunded entitlement liabilities, Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, federal pensions, military pensions, is $120 trillion. And I'm sorry, the first number I gave you was wrong. It's not 141 trillion, it's 161 trillion private net worth of Americans. So just for fun, Let's take 161 and subtract 150, which is to say net federal obligations on and off balance sheet. That leaves a private net worth of Americans of $11 trillion. That's before state and local debt, and it's before individual debt. That's the headline number. But it gets a little worse. Every year, the deficit, on balance sheet deficit at the federal level, exceeds $2 trillion. That's fairly well known and scary. Equally scary and less well known is that the net present value of accreted liabilities in entitlements also escalates by $2 trillion a year. So that $150 trillion number gets larger by $4 trillion a year, or more worrying, the delta between the private net worth of Americans and our obligations, $11 trillion, gets smaller. Some of the big thinkers in the United States, AOC, Bernie Sanders, Kamala Harris, these people, probably Donald Trump, have suggested that we could solve our entitlements problems by taxing the billionaires more. The problem with that narrative is arithmetic. The Congressional Budget Office suggests that the total net worth of America's billionaires is about $6.7 trillion. If rather than increasing their taxes, you stole all of their money, you fund the accretion of on and off balance sheet liabilities in the United States by approximately 20 months, and you do nothing to reduce the principal. I could go on with more and more numbers, but the crux of the problem is represented in a little poem that my grandfather taught me. It goes like this: when your outgo exceeds your income, your upkeep becomes your downfall. And that's what America must deal with. Now, I think I know the way out because I'm old enough to have lived through part of it in the past. I should give you one more number just to make the thing preposterous. The gross federal income from all sources, which is to say all the money the government steals from its citizens, before they've spent a dime on anything, before defense, before interest, before all the other goofy stuff they do, the gross federal income is $5 trillion. Remember that the accretion in total liabilities is $4 trillion. So the total amount of money that they raise before they buy a roll of toilet paper for the White House is $5 trillion. Interest is over $1 trillion, and the accretion of unfunded liabilities on and off balance sheet is $4 trillion. Now explain to me how we deal with that math. Even students from a school system as dysfunctional as the one in the United States would understand, I think, that it's impossible to come up with a positive sum if you add a column of negative numbers. And that's the circumstance that we're in. You don't have to have attended a school system as good as the one in Singapore to be able to understand that you can't add a string of a string of minuses and come up with a positive. It simply doesn't work like that. So it seems to me that we have two choices, we could do what honest politicians have done, the ones in Argentina, and we could default. We could say to the bondholders, too bad, so sad. Yes, you lent us the money. Yes, we spent it. You're screwed. Strong letter to follow. And we could say to the entitlement beneficiaries, old, bald, fat guys like me, yeah, that's right. You paid in for 60 years, but the money's gone. So we're going to stiff you. That would be honest,
Right.
Yes, we promised it. Yes, we lied. That's what we do. But that's not what we're going to do. What we're going to do is a dishonest default. We are going to do, when I say we, I mean Americans, what we did in the 1970s. We're going to have a dishonest default. We are going to allow or force the purchasing power of the US dollar to deteriorate drastically. And we're not going to index either capital gains or income taxes to inflation. In the decade of the 1970s, according to the Office of Management and Budget, the predecessor to today's Congressional Budget Office, the purchasing power of the US dollar declined by 75%, which is in effect a 75% reduction in the nominal value of the net debt, which is to say our unfunded entitlement liabilities, if they were in real terms $30 trillion, as opposed to in nominal terms $120 trillion, become much more serviceable in an economy that has the GDP and frankly the capital efficiency in the private side that the US economy has. And that has fairly profound implications. If you're an old codger like me, and you think that between your private savings and your Social Security, that you're going to do fine for the balance of your time on Earth, you need to understand that those sources of income will be insufficient. They will purchase a quarter as much in the future as they purchase today. Say the naysayers, but Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid are indexed to inflation. Wrong. They are indexed to the CPI, which is an aggregate, an index that is originated by the government. If you believe the CPI, you believe that the deterioration of the US dollar is proceeding along at about 2.9% a year. The problem with that is that the index is ridiculous. First of all, it's hedonistically adjusted, which is to say the indexers decide on the value of something, irrespective of its market price. Imagine how that might work out. The people who put us in this budget dilemma are the people who are figuring out the values of the index. Secondly, when it's inconvenient, the index doesn't include food or fuel. You saw me physically in Vancouver. Food is important to me. An index that doesn't include lunch
all
is
of us.
absolutely no use to me. And most laughably, the index doesn't include tax. The most important component of most America's cost of living, tax, is excluded from the index. I believe that the deterioration in the purchasing power of the US dollar, at least in the period 2020 to 2025, is proceeding along at about 8% compounded rather than 2.5 to 2.9% compounded. Gasoline prices have almost doubled. Mortgage interest rates have doubled. Rents have doubled. Health insurance costs, thanks to Obamacare, have doubled. And the government would have you believe that the deterioration of the purchasing power of your dollar for most of that period was 2.5% compounded, which is silly, truly silly. So people who are looking forward to the next 10 years on fixed incomes need to understand that their standard of living, their material standard of living, will decline in pace with the deterioration of the purchasing power of the US dollar. We did that once before in the 1970s. If you study the 1970s, there will be parallels. Not exact parallels, but there will be parallels. I will point out one probably salient factor to your audience. In that decade of the 70s, while the US dollar lost 75% of its purchasing power, the price of gold went up 30-fold. Not a typo, 30-fold. I'm not suggesting that gold goes up 30-fold from here. It's up 12-fold since the year 2000 already. But I am suggesting to your audience that I think there's a strong possibility, if not a probability, that the nominal price of gold, the US dollar price of gold, increases in a way that mirrors the deterioration in the purchasing power of the US dollar, or at least mirrors negative real interest rates, which is to say the level by which the interest yield on the US 10-year Treasury lags the real rate of inflation. And one more thing in this long-winded soliloquy. I am not suggesting that the US dollar performs badly against other currencies. I think there's going to be a lot of currency fluctuation. I think the US dollar will ultimately do well against the euro and the pound, as an example. I'm talking about absolute rather than relative value declines with regards to the US dollar. I hope that synopsis works for you.
Yeah. I feel like running to my bedroom and hiding under the covers. I felt that way when you're giving the talk in Vancouver, and I feel that way again now.
Jason, that guarantees that you lose. Curling up in fetal position is not an option. There were a lot of people in the decade of the 70s who did pretty well. I'm reminded, and I think I mentioned in the speech, coincident with the decade of the 70s was a bear market in equities that actually began in 1968 and lasted till 1982. As a young stockbroker, I remember it well. During that period, where the equities markets were sideways to down for 14 consecutive years, Warren Buffett generated a 24 or 25% compound annual internal rate of return. There is no requirement that you don't do well simply because society has lived beyond its means. People who develop within themselves skill sets so that they can deliver goods and services to society that society values more than they value their savings or income. In other words, people who generate real utility that can be sold in a free market will do extraordinarily well. I did extraordinarily well in the decade of the 70s. I had the good fortune, I don't think I had the good sense, I had the good fortune to be very interested in natural resources and to be willing to work very hard. The decade of the 70s was extremely kind to me. And there's no reason why the next 10 years won't be kind to you. As an example, delivering sound advice to an audience in a channel like your own, developing a following, perhaps giving away paradigm and ultimately selling branded conclusions, may very well guarantee that the two of you do extraordinarily well when many of those around you who are less able to deliver utility do poorly. I think, too, that this reckoning that I'm talking about, the triumph ultimately of mathematics over narrative, will generate an awful lot of volatility and will likely generate periodic liquidity crises in capital markets. People who maintain liquidity can take advantage of those circumstances rather than being taken advantage of. It's subtle because cash savings cost you money. If you're saving in US dollars right now, you're getting paid 4.5, 4.6 in the US 10-year Treasury in a currency that's deteriorating by 8% compounded, which is to say, rather than making 4.5, you're actually losing 3.5. I consider, and I have a lot of short-term US dollar liquidity yielding a little less than that. The negative interest yield, I suggest, is an option premium on liquidity. The liquidity gives you the cash and the tools and hopefully the courage to take advantage of liquidity squeezes and panics like 2008 rather than being taken advantage of.
Yeah.
This is not the circumstance where somebody who's made a little money can buy a US 30-year Treasury and count on clipping coupons for the rest of time. They will get paid those coupons, but the coupons will pay less and less. But people who respond to a 2 or 3 month long 50% decline in the nominal value of US equities, if they pick and choose the equities that they buy on a 50% off sale, can be expected to come out of the next decade substantially better in real terms than they are today. The difficulty is that whether you succeed or fail, is going to depend on the utility that you generate for others and the delta between the utility that you generate and the utility that you consume. The idea that you can merely exist off the tit of the state for the next 10 years, as people have done for the, pardon me, for the last 40, is extremely problematic.
Yeah, Lovis, I don't know if you saw the news, but I think it ties totally into what Rick was mentioning, right? Like in Germany, Rick, today the retirement age is 67. But I just saw last night that there was a headline saying that they want to raise it to 73. So, of course.
Well, I'm of two minds. I can't imagine retiring. I failed it completely. From the government's viewpoint, I mean, first of all, I don't think it's any of their business what age somebody retires at. But I absolutely understand cutting off their benefits before age 73. In the U.S., at the time that Social Security was instituted, it protected Americans effectively at poverty level from age 65 beyond. And the average life expectancy of an American male was 66 years.
Right. Yeah.
They covered them for a year at a low level. We could probably afford that. Whether we should or not is a different thing, but we could probably afford that. So the idea that the intended benefit correspond with the median life expectancy of the population makes absolute sense to me. I don't work as hard as I worked when I was your age, but I can't imagine not working. I'm lucky enough to be in a circumstance where almost whatever happens in the next 10 years, I'm going to do fine. But I like working. Working enhances my sense of self-worth and well-being. And I think this focus on retirement that people have, well, it's not my business to tell them how to live their lives. My suspicion is that they didn't take enough control of their own life to begin with, which is to say they didn't find an occupation that gave them enough pleasure that they generated enough utility to make it worth their while. I'm, as you know, celebrating retirement by starting a nationally chartered bank, not an activity that I would recommend for someone who is interested in leisure.
Yeah. There's Jason and I have talked about this many times. You know, what is it? The highest amount of heart attacks happen on Monday mornings as people are going to the jobs that they hate, they've been dreading all Sunday, type of thing. So early in life, I've kind of used that feeling that some people call the Sunday scaries as an indicator whether or not I'm on track doing something that actually gives me purpose and actually enjoy doing. And so I'm lucky to be in the situation where now it's like, oh man, it's already Friday. That's a bummer.
Yeah, that's great. That for you, I mean, you're going to have to adjust the way you think in the next 10 years. But the fact that you really enjoy what you do, you are going to be competing against people who are doing it for the money. And you're going to be doing it to serve your market. And I humbly suggest as a consequence of that, in my finest English, you're going to kick their asses. It isn't going to be close. I used to joke when I was a kid, in the securities business, I was competing against guys that wanted to buy a Lamborghini. That was sort of the outcome. The only interest I had in Lamborghinis was perhaps owning a Lamborghini dealership.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
The idea that they were producing for consumption meant that these guys were my normal and natural victims. They didn't stand a chance against me. I couldn't wait to get to work. I resented going home. And I worked very, very, very hard, from the time I got to work to the time I went home. And when I got home, my mind was still working. It was very difficult for me, very difficult for people who were competing against me when my visualization of success was a boatload of happy customers and their vision of success was a Lamborghini in the driveway. And I'm understating how difficult it would have been in that circumstance for them to compete with me, even if they were smarter than I, which many were.
Yeah, I guess with your North Star being having a bunch of happy customers, it basically aligns everything from a fundamental level, right? So it doesn't matter what time your boss says you come to work or you go home, or when the government says you're supposed to retire, for example. You just find a way around it and get to
I
point A to
have a
point B way quicker.
I have a friend, and I won't name him, but he's built a really truly multinational business. He operates in 40 countries or something like that. American, although he doesn't live in the United States. And in his French operation, the French government decreed that his employees couldn't work more than 32-hour weeks. But the kind of people who were attracted to work for this guy were not 30-hour or 32-hour a week workers. They worked to the task, And so they were routinely working, 50-hour weeks, 52-hour weeks, sometimes longer if there was more to do. And occasionally the French government would come inspect the workplace. And the workers explained away to the French government that they weren't working for him. They were using his facilities for their own endeavors. In other words, they were stealing his time and space. Now, that was fine with the inspectors.
Right.
And that subterfuge is what enabled this French operation to do extraordinarily well by global terms, not merely by French terms.
Yeah.
We have some audience, right, Lovis, in Asia. And I think when they hear this about the European governments and some of the rules they have, they will flat out not believe it. Like they will
Right.
actually jump on ChatGPT to see if that statement's true. Because I know for a fact they won't believe it.
Yeah, they're still working 6 days a week, 10 hours a day in China as a rule, right? And yeah, as they should if it pleases them, right? So Rick,
I remember
yeah.
earlier in my career when I was selling Sprott institutional products in Asia, and I was dealing even with government workers, or at least workers in, state-controlled firms. And I would say, is this time convenient, given the, difference in time spread? And if these guys wanted to talk to me, they would say, "You pick it, we'll be there."
Yeah.
And it was weird to have government officials, or not officials, but people working for sovereign wealth funds or foreign treasuries, which is to say, really government employees, say, "You name the time."
Yeah, it's a very different mindset, I think, over there. It's still to this day. But so, Rick, just pivoting back to the kind of thing that I said in the entry, and I think everything you've said since is completely pertinent to that. But so with gold just hitting $4,000 an ounce, at least in the markets, right? Physical has probably been above that for a while already. But what signal is the market sending, and who's listening?
Gold does well when investors are concerned about the maintenance of their purchasing power in fiat-denominated savings products. Let's examine for a U.S. investor whether that fear is rational. The most important savings product on the planet, the one by which even today all others are judged, is the U.S. 10-year Treasury. I'm not saying that U.S. dollar hegemony is complete. I'm just saying that the U.S. 10-year Treasury is the predominant savings product on the planet. That yields 4.6 in a currency where the purchasing power is declining by 8. What possible response could you have to a circumstance where in the predominant savings product in the world, you are losing 3.5% real purchasing power compounded? This isn't fear. This is a guarantee. So I think investors are reacting rationally. There is disintermediation out of the U.S. Treasury, in fact, out of the U.S. dollar, the world's reserve currency, in favor of the golden constant. This is exacerbated by the U.S. government's weaponization of the U.S. dollar and weaponization of the U.S. 10-year Treasury. Whether or not you agree with Russia's actions in the Ukraine, as an example, the decision by the U.S. government, without recourse to courts of law, to steal $300 billion in Russian assets denominated in U.S. Treasuries, I think sent a message to sovereigns around the world who might occasionally run afoul of U.S. government intentions. The U.S. in effect, nationalization of the SWIFT banking system to enforce sanctions. The SWIFT banking system was not a U.S. possession, but the U.S. government unilaterally used the SWIFT banking system and access to U.S. dollar settlements to punish governments that were attempting to maintain their sovereign rights in terms of relationships with other governments. This sent a fairly stark message to little tiny nothing nowhere countries like the People's Republic of China, India, Iran, Brazil, name one,
Indonesia.
even Canada,
Yeah.
looked askance at the weaponization of the US dollar and the poor arithmetic around the US Treasury and said, oh, Christ, we're out of here, which is a logical response.
Yeah. Okay. So that makes sense. There's de-dollarization, there's general, you're losing ground saving in the so-called risk-free savings asset, right?
If you're non-US, it's bad politics and bad math. Why would you assign seigniorage to a country whose interests are increasingly antithetical to your own? I think with regards to the Chinese, they figured out something else. Or at least they think they figured out that domestic infrastructure investments yield a higher real return than U.S. 10-year treasuries. I suspect that there's enough malinvestment in China that supposition won't actually end up being true, but that's a very different topic.
So Rick,
go ahead, Jason.
Okay. For me, you mentioned earlier that in the 70s, the purchasing power of the dollar took a hit so that the servicing of that debt would become less difficult, right? So if that is the playbook that the US government needs to put into play now, how would they go about doing that? If you were in their shoes and you were told, hey, I need to get the dollar purchasing power down so that we can repay these debts, how do you get somebody working at McDonald's earning $300,000 a year?
Well, look at the price of goods now compared to the year 2000.
Yeah,
it's happened.
Yeah,
we are just recognizing it. What happens is that if the nominal, and by the way, people whose skill sets are limited to working at McDonald's are going to have a horrific decade. The McDonald's that I visit in my town employs so many people who are functionally illiterate that they have icons on the cash register key. In other words, these people are sufficiently illiterate that they need to respond to icons to key in orders. I said at the onset of this interview that to survive the decade well, you have to possess skills and capabilities that allow you to generate utility. AI and voice recognition, I think, is going to eliminate the lower end of the service and clerical livelihoods. But back to the question. That was an illustration. If the purchasing power of the U.S. dollar declines and nominal wage rates, at least for skilled workers, increases in nominal as opposed to real terms, if the GDP grows as a consequence of the deterioration in the value of the US dollar, if the GDP grows in nominal terms, threefold as an example, government continues to so-called consume 35% of GDP. And if taxes consume 20 or 25% of GDP, what that suggests is that the nominal tax income of the US government triples at the same time that the actual value of the entitlement obligations that they pay falls by 3/4. It's, I guess, the difference between real and nominal levels that makes all the difference. If the tax rolls triple in a nominal sense, that's how you inflate your way out of it. If the if the real value, let's take some old geezer like me. I don't know what they pay me for Social Security, but let's say it's $4,000 a month. They have no earthly idea, actually. Let's say it's $4,000 a month. They will continue to pay me $4,000 a month, and they might even escalate it annually by the CPI rate of inflation. The price of the goods and services that I consume is going to increase by 8% a year, or maybe 10% a year. Through the middle part of the decade of the 70s, the US dollar deterioration was 15% a year. So that by the end of the decade, my $4,000 stipend will purchase, in a real sense, $1,000 worth of goods and services.
Yeah.
And
Makes
I think we'll
sense.
do what Germany proposes to do. I think with regards to Social Security, that they are going to raise the vesting years. I think they're going to have to. I think, too, that they are going to eliminate the exclusion from Social Security tax on earned income above $160,000 a year. They're going to do what Bernie says and axe the tax. I will feel the burn in my wallet. In addition to the fact that they are going to end the upper income tax exclusion, they're also going to mean to test the benefit. In other words, Social Security is going to become an overt transfer program, as opposed to the masquerade as an insurance program that currently manifests itself. And that'll happen in all developed countries.
Did you ever, I mean, respectfully, but maybe it's too late, but have you ever considered along the journey of your life to just leave the US behind for a different system, or not really?
Two problems with that. First of all, I procrastinated. And the US has been, for most of my life, if you generated utility, the easiest place to start in the world.
Yeah, I agree.
I didn't come from a wealthy household. My mom was a single parent school teacher. There were occasions in my youth when we ran out of money before we ran out of month, but I was lucky enough that there were examples of success in both sides of my family that I knew what was possible. I knew it was possible. I wasn't born in a circumstance so bleak that I didn't have role models to aspire to. But the U.S. system still afforded me so much opportunity that I wouldn't trade it. U.S. society is still facing competition, but it's still a society that is so creative and that is still tolerant of success. It's still a society where 5 or 6 kids can commandeer a garage in Sunnyvale and out pops Google or out pops Apple. That's what's postponed the reckoning as long as it's postponed. We've been stupid and sinful at a collective level for a long time. But the United States is still a society where our individual creativity and persistence has funded our collective stupidity. It's been a real war, but thus far the individuals have won. The other is that I didn't leave. The United States cleverly put in place a trap, which is to say, if you renounce your U.S. citizenship and go elsewhere,
exit
they have
tax.
a couple of interesting surprises for you. The first thing they do is that they mark your assets to market and charge you a capital gains tax, which is to say, although you leave, they steal your money anyway. And then, in certain circumstances, if you ever intend to come back to the U.S., even as a visitor, they charge you a tax for 10 years, even though you're not a U.S. citizen. Now, from a practical point of view, most people who expatriate, when presented with this delayed tax bill, show the IRS that international high sign of unfriendliness known as the middle finger, and teach the government the difference between invoice and remit. The third thing for me was that by culture, I'm American. I lived in New Zealand for a while, really enjoyed it, but I wasn't a Kiwi.
Yeah.
The truth is, in my core, I'm a gringo. Maybe an odd gringo, an old feisty gringo, but I'm a gringo. I'm culturally American. When I go to London, I really enjoy it. When I go to Shanghai, I really enjoy it. When I went to New Zealand, I really enjoyed it. But I'm not any of those things.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you for giving your view on that, because Jason and I talk about, where to live and where to build life all the time. And, of course, my family at this point is half German, half American.
Right.
And much like you, I've always found ample opportunity in the US. And that's also really what's drawing me there still today. Despite all the issues, I find that easier and still actually more agreeable to live there than in Germany, to be honest. So
I have probably 100 friends who have expatriated from the United States. Some of them for moral reasons. They don't want their signature by way of tax on a bomb. And probably if I had the courage of my convictions, the actual courage of my convictions, I'd either leave or I'd be in prison. But I have flexible morals, I guess. So sloth and lethargy has made me stay. Part of me says, had I in my 30s emigrated to Liechtenstein or something, that would have been a circumstance that would have worked. The idea that there is a hereditary ruler who regards his citizens as customers as opposed to chattel is interesting to me. I have a couple of other friends who don't exist, kind of. They read PT. For those of your listeners who don't know what that is, PT is a piece of writing that came about in the 70s, and PT can either stand for perpetual traveler or prior taxpayer. And these gentlemen that I know have passports from countries where they're not resident. And they, from an official point of view, they don't exist.
yeah,
That's not a way I want to live, frankly.
no, same. Rick, I wanted to pivot to kind of the last chapter in our limited time today. But so, of course, you've probably made and lost a couple of fortunes in natural resources, but then you've also gone and started not just one, but you're on your second bank. And so there was something that I started getting into in our conversation in Vancouver that I wanted to pick up today. There's this gentleman called Professor Richard Werner, and he has written on credit creation, and he's studied extensively Japan, Germany, all over the world. And he says that banks don't just move money around, they actually create it. And when they lend, they create new purchasing power. And so whoever controls the credit system in a very real way controls the economy. What do you think of that framing?
What he says about creating money is partly true. To the extent, Lovis, that you deposit $1 million to me, and then I lend it to Jason, you have $1 million credit, and he has $1 million, which is to say I turned $1 million into $2 million. The problem with extrapolating that daisy chain ad nauseum is that if he defaults, we destroy money as fast as we create it. The banking system facilitates credit expansion until it doesn't, until it makes mistakes. The default cycle that we went through in the United States in the 1930s, an example, the credit collapse, obliterated the money supply because the circumstance that Mr. Berner described in terms of creation involves an expansive banking environment, not a contracting banking environment. Banking is a superb business. What you are really doing is providing depositors a service. You are insuring, historically privately, with your balance sheet, with the bank equity, the sanctity of their deposits. And you are reviewing investment outlets and making investments in a way that absolves them the responsibility of generating an economic yield on their savings. They become passive as opposed to active savers and investors. If you are a disciplined banker, the difference between your cost of funds, which is to say your deposits, and your yield on funds, which is to say your loans, the margin between the two is yours. That presumes that you don't make too many mistakes. And that's a fee both for doing the work in allocating the saver's assets, but also a fee for the fact that your equity capital is risk capital. Your equity capital, in fact, is part of the insurance that guarantees the sanctity of their deposits. In the modern era where banking is politicized, it's an even better business, which is to say that, Lovis, if you deposit $250,000 with me, you actually aren't lending it to me. You're lending it to the U.S. government, which is to say they guarantee the first $250,000, which for $250,000 worth of deposits means that I'm offering up a riskless product. Even if I do something stupid with the money, the taxpayer bails you out. And that means that deposit interest rates on at least the first $250,000 of your deposits are artificially low because I get to cruise along on the credit of we the people. That's a really good. What happens with banking is that people take a really, really, really good basic business and they get greedy and they screw it up. You need to maintain adequate equity so that you can survive capital drawdowns like 2008. The U.S. banking business traditionally has generated very high returns on equity because they haven't put much equity up, which is to say they've obviated their insurance function by having too little equity. The political powers that be, including those who regulate me, suggest that an equity cover of 7% of total assets is well capitalized. I prefer 10. I just prefer 10. The other one, well, bankers traditionally make three other mistakes. First of all, financial services businesses tend to become compensation machines, which is to say that the officers, directors, and employees often expropriate a larger amount of free cash flow than they should really truly be due. And they engage in something called a time spread. Usually, interest rates with a short maturity are lower than interest rates with a long maturity because of the uncertainty of time and the greater possibility of risk or mistake in long term. Many banks have assets on their books that have 8 or 10-year durations, but they're funded with overnight deposits. Overnight deposits yield less and long-term obligations yield more. If you have a circumstance where interest rates rise, the capital value of the income on your long-term assets declines at the same time that your cost of funds goes up. You get pinched by a time squeeze. That's what obliterated the U.S. savings and loan industry. It's what obliterated Silicon Valley Bank. So you have to have adequate capital, and you can't have time spreads. The third thing that I think that you have to do is you have to confine your lending activities to businesses that you understand. You have to understand how to value the collateral, and you have to understand the interplay between the balance sheet and the income statements in those sectors that you lend to. The folks at JP Morgan Chase and Citicorp and Wells Fargo and Bank of America, I know a lot of them. Really smart guys. Really smart guys. Hardworking guys. I say guys and gals these days. But I don't believe that any aggregation of human beings can be smart enough to make intelligent investment decisions in 1,000 different industries. I don't think it can be done. I think the probability of mistakes rises with the number of different activities that you focus on. And so, and I guess the fourth advantage that I would point to myself with regards to my banking career has been not to be all things to all people, to focus on services that I believe that the market is short of in communities that I know how to access and serve. So for me, banking is going to be around things like gold and natural resources. My customer acquisition cost in those businesses, because I've served those industries for 50 years, my customer acquisition cost is nil. When we opened Everbank in the year 2000, our customer backlog, which is to say the people that were waiting to do business with us, was at zero. It was ready, fire, aim.
Yeah.
With Battle Bank, we have 18,000 people on our
Wow.
waiting list. And 2/3 of those people, 3/4, I'm sorry, are familiar enough with the bank that they have looked at the goods and services that we propose to offer and told us which ones they're interested in
Already.
already.
Yeah.
So my competitors' customer acquisition cost may be $250 or $300 per customer. Mine thus far, other than wear and tear on my old carcass, is nil. And I think that's a durable competitive advantage.
Yeah, for sure.
We've seen a market in this bank and our last bank where Americans are normally forced by circumstance to save in the US dollar only. We believe that we're coming into a period of currency turmoil, and we believe in particular first generation Americans who do business in other countries, you two guys are prime examples, live their life in multiple currencies. And so they should be able to denominate their savings in multiple currencies. And we'll offer certificates of deposit, money market accounts in 20 currencies, not just one. We will also pay interest on people's savings, including accounts that have checking. There are several trillion dollars in the United States deposited in accounts that pay no interest. We think our customers are interested in interest.
They
We
sure
will
are.
loan to industries that we understand. In particular, we believe that physical gold, silver, platinum, and palladium are good collateral. No U.S. bank that I know of will establish credit lines backed by precious metals in principal amounts less than $10 million. We would certainly be happy to offer a $10 million credit, but we'll take that number from 10 million down to 100,000. In other words, we'll scrape 2 zeros off it and make it accessible.
Yeah, excellent.
Yeah.
Thanks for the chance for the commercial.
No.
Any of your listeners who think that this is attractive should go to battlebank.com.
At the moment, at the moment that's for U.S. customers, right? People
US
that
and
live
Canadian.
and Canadian. Okay.
Yeah, it
Okay.
took us about 3 years in Everbank to comply with domestic regulations. Ultimately, at Everbank, if my memory serves me correct, we were able to offer banking services to people in 30 countries.
Okay. So then I'll put my
But
name on the
to
list.
begin with,
Then.
it's the US and Canada.
Rick, we're at the time limit. As
Yeah.
always, would love to keep going, but you know what? We'll just keep doing these once a year or so.
Sure. Well, we can do them once a
Keep
quarter if
reconnecting.
you like. It's
Once-
just whatever you guys like. This is, if people wonder, this amuses me, but it also is part of the process where I reduce my customer acquisition cost to zero.
Exactly. Happy to help.
Yeah, happy to help.
Jay, do you have any last remarks, comments, questions for Rick?
No. I just want to say that time passed really quickly, and I'm looking forward to the next time we get the chance.
I as well, and I hope to see you, if not in Frankfurt at that conference, then at Giant's conference next year.
We'll absolutely run into each other no matter what. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you,
Thanks,
gentlemen.
Rick. Thanks, Rick.
And that wraps up our main conversation. But we're not done yet. We're going into overtime, where Jason and I unpack some insights, reflect on what just happened, and connect a few dots. And go.
Yo.
That this hour, it's like a time machine, right? The hour goes by and you're like, 10 minutes? What? What happened?
I can actually feel my brain, my skull, feeling some pressure because, you're trying to jam the thoughts and the information in at the same time. And Rick's just going like off the top of his head, right? Oh, yeah, that sounded. The arithmetic part, to hear it again, like it was grim the first time, but to hear it again, and it's just, I feel sorry, man, for the pensioners that are looking forward to retiring on that amount of fixed income that they're gonna get.
I think so. I don't have a fully formed thought on that. I also feel sorry because it's a promise not kept, right? To them.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, I think on
They
some
should have
level,
known better.
on some level, it was never a good promise, you know?
Yeah.
Because I don't think that this promise makes us better people, if that makes sense.
Yeah, you're outsourcing a huge part of your responsibility as a human being to somebody that you didn't know.
Yeah, to a system, right? To an institution. And it's like, if people are like, well, what do you mean? It's like, well, in old age, maybe you're supposed to have family, right? Like your kids, your grandkids take care of you or something. Maybe you're supposed to live in a community where you guys do that to each other. That's maybe multi-generational. Maybe you're supposed to be productive enough where you can have your own savings take care of you, or maybe you've purchased enough assets that will take care of you in old age. Maybe it's just a matter of becoming actually financially literate and savvy enough to use other private means of investment to sustain you into your old age. All these things, like, while of course all of that is hard work to do, but all these things actually would lift you to the next level, right? As an operator, as somebody who's in charge of their own life, right? It
You
would make you so
mature,
much.
basically, right? You
Yeah.
just mature. Agree. Yeah. It's funny, I just had this conversation with Anya yesterday, my wife, and we were saying how it's weird that as Germans, it would be kind of super taboo or awkward to go and ask your retired parents if they're okay with their pension, how they're doing in terms of budgeting, do they have enough, do you need help? Whereas for me in Singapore, it's like, of course you ask them. You go, hey, mom, dad, everything cool? Like, you guys good? Do I need to chip in? Or they'll go, hey, Jay, are you guys okay? Do you need some help if you want to buy a house or something? Do you need help? Like, the family is the social welfare system, right? But over here, the state has come in such a big way that it's become taboo to speak to your own family about taking care of each other. And
Yeah.
talking about money is now a bad thing, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it comes from because nobody has any in Germany, right? My favorite rebuttal, and it's of course tongue in cheek, but my favorite rebuttal whenever the Germans are like, "Oh, the rich and poor divide in the U.S. is so stark, and that's disgusting," and I'm like, "Yeah, in Germany it's much less stark because everybody's poor."
And does that keep you in their good graces?
No, of course not. They're like, no, it's not true. First of all, second of all, they're like, no, the divide is also pretty bad here, which I'm like, I don't know.
It's focusing on the wrong thing, right?
It's focusing on the wrong thing, exactly, and it's be that as it may, in another country, like, just focus on yourself, right? Like, it's also, it's a different topic, but it's always this like, but at least we're not as bad as the other guys. Like, well, but you're also not as good as the best guy, right? So, but yeah, you're completely right? So, you're starting a family, and this idea of like a nest egg, right? That parents would save that, help you get into your first home that you could own. It's somewhat dead in the US too, but it's completely dead in Europe, I think. But of course also has to do with real estate prices have gotten so insanely high that it feels virtually impossible for anybody to even attempt to buy a home. But of course that's grotesque, right? It shouldn't be like that.
I mean, hey, Lovis, think about this, right? If you lose your job now in this place, you need money for whatever reason, you need a medical procedure done or whatever, right? And you just need cash badly. In my culture, it would mean you go talk to your family or your friends, right? To just get you out of the hole. And maybe that means if I know that when I act irresponsibly, I need to go hat in hand to ask the people that are close to me for help. It's a bit of a taking a few pegs, down in your status amongst your friends and family. It kind of aligns you, maybe similar to what Rick was saying, right? Like he had no competition because of his alignment with his final goal. And
Mhm.
I think the same thing happens when you are accountable to your social group, But over here, I also noticed that when there's a problem, it's okay. The state's got your back, right? And I don't care what Dr. So and so at the Arbeitsamt, the welfare center thinks of me, right? Because he doesn't know me. And I just feel like I'm gonna be getting something, a benefit with no shame attached, right?
Right.
So I think that's also something that it's kind of ironic that at the end of the day that welfare state will fail, just with the math that Rick was talking about. And I think the really cool part was that bit at the end where he said, what was it, that all the billionaires in total come up to 6 trillion? And at the end of the day, that actually doesn't even make a difference, right?
Yeah.
So
It's
even if
always
you took
tax
everyone's
the
money,
rich is the solution, right?
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
I think we're
Was
watching
all
the welfare state kind of dissolve in front of our eyes, right? Just that they don't say it blatantly. The welfare
right.
state will still be there, but they won't be able to give you much welfare. They'll give you a check, but it won't buy anything.
Yeah. Right. That's basically the point. But then, I don't know. I mean, I have no idea if somebody like Rick, even just based on his age, if he does get the benefit. But it's also like, if you are above a certain net worth, then you also, it's just like, why would you even consider sending them a check? Oh, it's because it's fair. It's like, but the person doesn't need it. So reserve the money for the people that need it, right? But then that also actually, and I was super happy that he repeated it, because I actually was for whatever reason thinking of that. These entitlements were started when the life expectancy of the average worker was so little, right? So they go, oh, yeah, you can retire at 65. Averagely, we'll cover you for a year, maybe two. And now people live to 100, right? Like, even, I mean, maybe not on average, but on average, I think to over 80. So it's a completely different proposition to support somebody for 15 years. That might be a third of their whole working life, right? So how's that math ever supposed to pencil out? Like, it just doesn't work. And then, especially since, of course, the end of your life usually gets more expensive, not cheaper, right? So it would almost be better if you say, hey, you know what? After high school, you get 5 years of benefits from the state, so you can figure out what you want to do in life. And, you can travel and you can be kind of free as a bird. But there's no more retirement benefit. That would probably be way cheaper to do it, to flip it, right, and give the people that when they're young, because they always say youth is wasted on the young. So instead, give them a time to explore. But yeah, there was a couple of things that Rick said that were mind bending again, or just like, I just love how he has such a good way with words, right? Like, what do you say, the golden constant or something?
Yeah. Yeah, he takes you along for a ride in a good way, right? Like you're on a magic carpet ride looking at everything, and then he just then drops the hammer on you with a factoid that just kills you. You go like, oh, the the view's nice, and then suddenly bang, yeah, look at this exhibit. That's why you need to be serious, right?
Yeah. So, do you think we have skills that will help us through this decade?
I think I don't know. I honestly believe that we try to be people that are of utility to others, right? And if that's always the guiding North Star, then hopefully Rick's right, and the market will find a way to reward us. I guess for me, what I didn't get to ask was, hey, let's say you are enterprising and hardworking and creative. Is there going to be a big difference deciding where it is you live so that you can get that delta between your utility and your consumption. Because let's say we talk about some socialist nation where they take away 90% of your disposable income and tell you, hey, we'll pay you a pension. And they do that under threat of violence, right? So it's like you said, a bad promise. But what happens if you are compelled and you are coerced and you don't actually want to give? I wish there was a chance for me to just opt out, right? I would be super happy to be living in a country of welfare and just say, hey, I choose not to partake, but I'm on my own. But that's not allowed in most Western countries, right? And I think that's an important point. It's not that everyone was really excited to get that pension benefit. It's more forced upon them. And then slowly, that amount just kept increasing, you know?
Yeah. And I mean, and of course, if you do take risks and they don't pan out, then that might be the only thing that you're stuck with. And then, of course, there's I mean, it's the only thing that you're left with. And then people are like, well, I guess it's better than nothing, right? So I mean, I think it's also good to be grateful for it on some level. It just shouldn't be your original plan, kind of.
Yeah, it should be it shouldn't be the main foundational plan for your old age, right?
Exactly. Just like, I mean, this is a little different, but you know, in the US, people save a lot for retirement. Employees save in these so-called 401k accounts. And then so this is, you know, you save some money and then often your employer gives you it's like, oh, you save 5% of your salary in it, we'll match it. So then you actually get, you know, 10% of your salary saved in it. And then you can buy equities with it, stocks. So tons of people do that. That's like their main source of retirement funds from like what they privately save. But it's so funny because I saw this video of the guy who invented that account. And he's like, it was never intended to be the retirement savings account for the average American employee. Never. This was supposed to be a supplement of a supplement. Like, and now what we have is, if people have retirement savings, it's almost always a 401k, like 99% of the time. And it also actually contributes a big part to this passive buying that just keeps pushing equities up in the valuations beyond any rhyme or reason, because it's all, everybody just sets it and forgets it. And the buying happens kind of by default, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's so many like law of unintended consequences to so much of this policy stuff. It's intense.
I guess, yeah, things just always get co-opted by people in positions of power, right? For selfish reasons. So you just have to always, to me, it's just minimize rules, man. Just take away these laws that force and compel you to do things with the fruits of your labor, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know, maybe we can get Rick to help us get in touch with the King of Liechtenstein. Maybe he can come on and tell us how to serve his customers, not his subjects, well, and how maybe other countries can follow suit. Or maybe he would give us some passports. I wouldn't mind having a Liechtenstein passport.
Right. No idea what the process is for that, but we'll find out. I think we might have a connection or two in that direction, so just a matter of exploring.
So if anybody in the audience has a line to His Majesty.
Yeah, I've actually, I mean, I've already emailed him and he respectfully declined. What was it again?
Maybe you should disrespectfully appeal.
No, but he wrote a great book, right? The State in the 21st Century. And it opens very much with what Rick said. It's like, I ask myself a lot, like not what can the state do for its subjects, but what can the state do better than a private enterprise for, you know, its customers. That's like his line of thinking. So and then when you think about it that way, there's very few things the state can do better. Well, yeah. So also, of course, I snuck in Professor Werner's plot into this episode, and I intend to clip it and send it to him to see if we can get him on, because I would love to have a conversation with him face to face like this.
Yeah. I think we'll have to tell him, please give us more than an hour. I was listening to his episode with Tucker Carlson, and it was hours long, right? And it
Yeah.
just, I was glued to the screen
Yeah.
the whole time.
Same. But we have a couple busy weeks ahead of us, right? So we kicked it off with Rick today. Got Maxime Bernier tomorrow, and next week we got Doomberg coming up, and then Deborah Lur, who was referred to us by Jen Ju Scott. So exciting 4 guests in a short span of time. So I'm very excited to have all these conversations with you and these guests, Jason.
Yeah, same, Louis. Same. So, till next time.
Till tomorrow.